Good morning, YouTube. What you're looking at is the rocks of the sheep farm, a boundary fence. It's my boundary fence that you're looking at there at the moment. I'm just going to turn around and show the edge effect of the sheep farm. I just noticed something kind of interesting. That there is a currajong tree. I knew there were currajong trees on my place, but I suppose because my boundary, my eastern boundary against that fence that runs east-west is there's a sheep skull you can see standing on a peg just to the left of that dead tree, almost in the centre of the frame. So I haven't actually ventured this far, say 100 yards beyond my boundary, but on the sheep farm. And what do I find? Currajong. That's a tree of life, a sacred tree in times of strife. 5 ways the tree will give you a feed, and if a net you crave or a bag you need. Under the bark there's long strong fibres by the yard. It's an easy carving softwood that on drying cures quite hard. Yeah. Unfortunately, you can cut the branches off these and feed them to a sheep in times of drought, and that's kind of what happened to most of the currajong trees. There is one of them about 300 yards away in that direction, down by the creek bed, which has carvings on it, going back to before the sheep showed up. But anyway, I didn't come here to show you the currajong tree on my neighbour's place. That's just a spontaneous discovery. My intention was to walk in along my eastern boundary, which is marked by the survey peg and the small rock T-shaped cairn at the foot of the stick that the sheep skull is mounted on. As in, for example, that white painted survey peg there. And there's the little T-shaped cairn marking the boundary, which is further highlighted by logs fallen along the boundary, contrived so as to point at the blaze on the young box tree. The blaze, which was put there in the 1980s, and the 100 acres I bought the title deed for was surveyed. That quaint little stick structure there is a barrier, which I placed on this access track just so people coming in from the neighbour's side, coming in along this 4-wheel drive track, would have some idea that they were crossing the boundary onto a different person's area of responsibility or block of land, shall we say, because that doesn't show much for somebody who's on the track concentrating on not striking their sump. So I figured this, a stone barrier with a wooden barrier which has since fallen over, might perhaps cause them to notice the boundary blaze mark on the tree lined up with the logs pointed at the survey peg. Okay, so behind me you can see a regrowth forest. It's probably 150 or so years old since it was first ring-barked and burnt and overgrazed. There's not many trees in here that are going to be over 180 years old, but We're coming on an area where there was a downburst out of a windstorm or something, and it's just created this little nest of spillikins. It's like 9-pins. There's trees pushed down in all directions, and some of them are pretty big trees too. We've just done a bit of a cut to show that right in the middle of the road we have a turning point marker for the deer, showing the limits of safe grazing, because if you get any closer than the turning point marker to the edge effect at the fence line, you might be shot at. We can also see one of the really big trees that's been knocked down in the downburst. As you can see, it's not a small tree. And the way we get through to the other side is by crawling. Right. How else do you get through that? Now, there was once a road along here, a track, which I haven't come up for 10 years or so, but I'm walking on the track now. And if we just start doing a 360, of the forest floor. That used to be a grassy clearing, a little glade in the forest where you could sit in the centre. It's the crown of the one we just crawled under. There it is, with its root ball. And what's happened here is a great big parcel of air that was colder and heavier than all the air surrounding it fell down out of the sky and landed on the tops of the trees in this clearing. And any trees that were shallowly rooted or half dead, they just fell over, and they all fell in different directions. But you'll notice there's actually a kind of a clockwise spiral going on with the trees on that side. And here we've got an anti-clockwise spiral swirling around on the other side. So like there's air currents spiraling as the blast comes straight down. Sadly, it's none of it fit for milling with the chainsaw mill that I do own, so it's all going to have to lie there until it gets used for firewood. Bit sad, but there you go. As I said, we're still on what used to be the road, and I'm going to contrast the forest with the power line easement, which people who've been watching my channel for a while, will be aware of, has just been landscape gardened and then had its edges wood chipped, which is quite an interesting event to be happening on an endangered species sanctuary. So I thought I might come back and have a bit of a look at it. Now, as I said, this is the old access track, and this here is where my son has been coming for firewood, and we've been regarding that game of Spillikins back there as something of a private firewood mine. Well, considering how much work there is to get to that stuff back there, it seems that Transgrid has probably spent, I don't know, $5,000 or $10,000 in sheet mulching the rocks and producing billets of firewood that are really easy to drive to and collect. Just laid it out for me. I don't think they know much about firewood because they've even cut some messmate into billets. So that was pretty much well-meaning industrious futility. They've certainly sheet mulched the rocks, and they've carried on like that all the way up the edges on both sides of the easement. And over here on the western side of the easement, yeah, they've set up logs for firewood. If we turn ourselves around, I did say to them that I'd been planning on cutting some of these down as poles for a windmill tower for years. So it looks like I'm going to be making a Stringybark round pole tower with 4 poles to it running from bottom to top. Maybe. We shall see how they go when I get the bark off and try moving them, which is going to be fun too, isn't it? That's a bit sad. If they left those 2 pieces of black oak on the treetop that they cut them off, it might have made a nice piece of wood to play with on the chainsaw mill. Casuarina sub rosa is a particularly decorative style of a wood. Here's one that they must have just kind of forgotten to pick up and wood chip. But I suppose I can forgive them that, because here's a couple of more long poles, pretty much fit for the windmill tower. Here's another one, and I think this one is the one that was cut down in the aerial chainsaws segment at the end of the spider safe wood chipping video, as proved by the bearing and the proximity to the small dead eastern grey kangaroo which appeared in the earlier video. They're very big on neat straight lines. The people at Transgrid. That's what they wanted, was a neat straight line parallel to their power line. I just counted the rings and it's 15 years. Try that one again. I just counted the rings. It's 25 years to the end of that stick. 150 years worth of growth. And they cut it down for the sake of neatness, and then crossed the fence at a tangent and went neatly on up the other side of the escarpment of the easement. Probably because of wet weather and muddy roads, some of the places they worked, they just dumped their mess and left all of it here, regardless of the fact that this is actually an old access track. I used to be able to drive up along here. I suppose, technically, they haven't actually blocked the track. Just made a bit of a mess of it. They didn't recognise that it was a track. So they've pushed a lot of shit around. And they've done the same along here. And for some reason, although they did spread out some of the wood chips, they also built themselves a wood chip mountain. Whereas on my place, they spread them around. Sadly, most of it on the edge of the clearing, rather than on the rocks where I really wanted it. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.